Keith Richards names. His top 4 rock women of all time. Keith Richards, born December 18, 1943, in Dartford, Kent, England, is the legendary guitarist, songwriter, and co-founder of the Rolling Stones, known for his distinctive riffs, raw energy, and rebellious spirit. Richards helped shape the sound of rock and roll for over 6 decades. His partnership with Mick Jagger produced some of the most iconic songs in music history, including I Can't Get No Satisfaction and Jumpin' Jack Flash. Despite decades of living the wild rock star lifestyle, Richards has remained a resilient force in music, admired for his authenticity and unshakable passion for performing. Beyond his work with the Stones, he has also released solo projects, showcasing his deep love for blues and roots music. Today, Keith Richards stands as a symbol of rock's enduring spirit, a survivor, innovator, and one of the most influential guitarists of all time. Keith kicks off by naming 5 male geniuses in rock and roll: Chuck Berry, Little Richard, Fats Domino, Eddie Cochran, Buddy Holly, before revealing his list of 4 female rockers who could tear down a stage and light a cigarette in the same breath. Keith Richards on Aretha Franklin. Following his lifelong devotion to authentic, soul-stirring music, Keith Richards often spoke about the artists who truly moved him. Among them, none held a higher place of honor than Aretha Franklin, the undisputed queen of soul. For Richards, Aretha was more than just a great singer. She was the embodiment of pure emotional truth in music. Her voice, he once said, carried the raw honesty of the blues, the spirituality of gospel, and the sophistication of jazz, all wrapped into a single, electrifying package. Richards first encountered Franklin's music in the mid-1960s, a time when the Rolling Stones themselves were breaking boundaries. Hits like Respect, You Make Me Feel Like a Natural Woman, and Chain of Fools didn't just top the charts. They commanded attention, reshaped the role of women in music, and infused soul into mainstream culture. Keith admired how Franklin could make any lyric, no matter how simple, resonate with a depth that felt both personal and universal. To him, she was proof that technical perfection meant little without genuine passion. What truly fascinated Richards was Franklin's ability to cross genres without losing her essence. She could take a pop song, a gospel hymn, or even a rock tune and make it entirely her own. Her 1969 rendition of the band's The Weight, for example, was a revelation to him. It showed her mastery in bridging musical worlds while staying true to her roots. This genre fluidity deeply resonated with Richards, whose own career with the Stones was defined by blending blues, rock, country, and soul. Beyond the music, Richards admired Franklin's resilience and independence in an industry dominated by male executives and rigid expectations. She maintained control over her artistry, negotiating her contracts and fiercely guarding her creative vision. To Keith, this made her not only an icon, but also a trailblazer who inspired musicians, especially women, to stand firm in their convictions. He often noted how Franklin's performances were never about empty showmanship. Even in her grandest moments, there was an intimacy in her delivery, as if she were singing directly to each listener. Richards believed this authenticity was why her music would outlive trends and fads. In his eyes, Aretha wasn't just part of music history. She was a pillar of it. The respect was mutual. Franklin spoke warmly of the Rolling Stones, and their paths crossed several times over the years. For Richards, those encounters only reinforced his admiration. He saw in her a shared love for the roots of American music, from gospel churches to smoky blues clubs. In the end, Keith Richards' love for Aretha Franklin was rooted in the same principles that guided his own career: authenticity, emotional truth, and the courage to be unapologetically oneself. To him, Aretha wasn't simply the queen of soul. She was the gold standard of what it meant to be an artist. Why Keith loved Ronnie Spectre? Following his deep admiration for strong, authentic female voices like Aretha Franklin's, Keith Richards often spoke fondly of Ronnie Spectre, the unforgettable lead singer of the Ronettes. To Richards, Ronnie wasn't just another talented vocalist from the 1960s. She was the very definition of rock and roll glamour fused with raw, emotional truth. Her voice, he said, had the street toughness of New York and the tenderness of a love song. A rare combination that made every note she sang unforgettable. Richards first met Ronnie in the early days of the Rolling Stones' career, when the band was still finding its footing in America. The Ronettes were already stars, with hits like Be My Baby and Baby, I Love You dominating the airwaves. Keith was immediately struck not only by Ronnie's unique voice, full of yearning, strength, and vulnerability, but also by her presence. She carried herself like a queen, but with an approachable warmth that made everyone feel like they'd known her for years. One of the main reasons Richards admired her was her authenticity. In an era when many pop acts were carefully packaged and polished, Ronnie seemed real. She didn't try to hide her emotions or put on an artificial facade. When she sang about heartbreak, you believed her. When she sang about joy, it felt genuine. For Keith, this honesty was the essence of great rock and roll, music that came from lived experience, not just clever lyrics or studio tricks. Her influence on Richards extended beyond admiration. It was also deeply personal. During the Stones' early tours in the U.S., the Ronettes and the Rolling Stones often shared stages in social circles. Keith recalled nights when Ronnie's laughter would fill the room, her energy magnetic, drawing people in. She had that rare quality of being both a star and a friend, someone who could dazzle under the stage lights and still sit on the floor with a guitar, singing softly into the night. Richards also respected her resilience. Ronnie's career was not without hardship, particularly her tumultuous marriage to producer Phil Spector, which she later escaped from in order to reclaim her life and career. Keith admired the courage it took to walk away from a controlling environment and to keep performing, even when the industry had largely moved on. To him, she was a fighter, proof that the spirit of rock and roll wasn't just about rebellion on stage, but also about the battles you fought in your own life. Musically, Ronnie embodied the kind of timelessness Keith valued. Songs like Walking in the Rain and Do I Love You still gave him chills decades later. Her voice had the rare power to transport you to a specific moment in time, yet it never felt dated. Richards once said that when he heard Ronnie sing, he was reminded why he fell in love with music in the first place, because of its ability to make you feel deeply, instantly, and completely. The bond between Richards and Ronnie endured for decades. They reunited at various events, always with the same warmth and mutual respect. In his memoir, Keith described her as pure rock and roll spirit, a blend of vulnerability, toughness, and grace that couldn't be manufactured. Even after years apart, when they crossed paths, it felt like no time had passed. Ultimately, Keith Richards' love for Ronnie Spectre came down to the same values he cherished in all his musical heroes: authenticity, emotional truth, and an unshakable connection to the roots of rock and roll. Ronnie was more than a voice. She was a living reminder of an era when music wasn't just entertainment, it was a lifeline. For Keith, Ronnie Spectre was, and always would be, one of the greats. Keith Richards' respect for Mavis After celebrating the soulful fire of singers like Ronnie Spectre, Keith Richards has often turned his praise toward another powerhouse, Mavis Staples. To Richards, Mavis isn't just a singer, she's a living embodiment of gospel-rooted soul, a bridge between spiritual tradition and the rebellious heartbeat of rock and roll. Her voice, steeped in the history of the Staples singers, has a warmth and depth that could comfort you like a prayer one moment and shake your bones like a blues riff the next. Keith's admiration for Mavis Staples began in the 1960s, when the Rolling Stones were absorbing influences from every corner of American music. The Staples singers were already a force in gospel and soul. Led by Roebuck Pops Staples, with Mavis as their charismatic lead. What struck Richards most was how Mavis could take the sanctity of gospel and infuse it with a groove that appealed to believers and non-believers alike. To him, she blurred the lines between sacred and secular in a way that felt both revolutionary and deeply authentic. Their paths crossed at various festivals and music events, and Keith was always drawn to her energy. In interviews, he often mentioned her truthful singing, how every note she delivered carried the weight of lived experience. It wasn't just technical skill that impressed him, but the emotional honesty behind it. Mavis didn't sing at you, she sang to you, pulling you into her world and making you feel every word. Richards also admired Mavis for her social consciousness. The Staples singers weren't just making hits. They were part of the soundtrack of the civil rights movement, with songs like Respect Yourself and I'll Take You There becoming anthems for change. Keith, who has always respected musicians who stand for something beyond entertainment, saw in Mavis a courageous artist using her platform to speak truth to power. On a musical level, Mavis's deep, rich contralto resonated with Keith's love for raw, roots-driven sound. She didn't need flashy runs or vocal gymnastics. Her strength came from conviction and phrasing. He once remarked that when Mavis sang a line, she meant it, and that was rarer than people realized in the music industry. Over the years, Richards and Staples collaborated on several occasions, most memorably during the filming of The Last Waltz and various tribute concerts. Keith often said that singing alongside her was like standing next to a freight train made of velvet, powerful, unstoppable, but utterly smooth. The respect was mutual. Mavis has spoken fondly of Keith's deep knowledge of American roots music and his genuine humility despite his rock legend status. What truly cemented Keith's affection for Mavis was her unwavering dedication to her craft. Even decades into her career, she continued to record, tour, and connect with new generations of listeners. She evolved without losing her essence, a quality Keith has always valued in artists. To him, Mavis Staples represents the kind of musical truth that never goes out of style, rooted in the past, alive in the present, and timeless in its emotional impact. Ultimately, Keith Richards loves Mavis Staples for the same reasons he cherishes all his musical heroes: authenticity, emotional depth, and an unbreakable connection to the roots of the music he loves. In Mavis, he sees not just a phenomenal singer, but a living piece of the soul of America, someone who can make you dance, make you weep, and make you believe, all in the space of a single song. Why Keith Richards loves Rate. After expressing his heartfelt respect for Mavis Staples, Keith Richards has often spoken just as warmly about another American music treasure, Bonnie Raitt. For Richards, Bonnie represents the perfect fusion of technical mastery, soulful authenticity, and fearless independence. She is not only a phenomenal guitarist and singer, but also an artist who carved her own path in an industry that often tried to pigeonhole women into predictable roles. Keith first became aware of Bonnie in the early 1970s when her blues-infused rock began making waves. What impressed him most wasn't just her slide guitar technique, which is considered among the best in the world, but the sincerity with which she delivered every note. Bonnie didn't just play the blues, she lived them. And Keith could hear that lived experience in her voice and in the raw, resonant tone of her guitar. One of the key reasons Richards admires Bonnie is her ability to blend genres seamlessly. While rooted in blues, her music often drifts into folk, country, R&B, and rock, creating a sound that's distinctly her own. This genre fluidity is something Keith values greatly, as the Rolling Stones themselves were built on a foundation of blending American musical traditions. In Bonnie, he saw a kindred spirit, someone unafraid to cross boundaries and reinvent herself without losing her core identity. Their paths often crossed at festivals, award shows, and tribute concerts. Keith always noticed that Bonnie carried herself with a rare kind of grace, humble yet confident, approachable yet magnetic on stage. She didn't need theatrics to captivate an audience. Her authenticity was enough. Richards has repeatedly mentioned that when Bonnie sings, you believe every word because she believes it herself. Another reason for Keith's deep respect is Bonnie's commitment to staying true to her artistry. In the late 1980s, when the music industry was dominated by synthetic pop sounds, Bonnie made a stunning comeback with her album Nick of Time, a record filled with organic instrumentation, heartfelt songwriting, and honest performances. For Keith, this wasn't just a career milestone, it was proof that integrity could triumph over industry trends. Richards also admires Bonnie's resilience in the face of personal and professional challenges. She has been open about her struggles with addiction and the work it took to rebuild her life and career. To Keith, who has faced his own battles, this honesty and perseverance make her artistry even more powerful. He has often said that the greatest musicians are those who channel their life's trials into their music. And Bonnie does exactly that. On a personal level, Keith appreciates Bonnie's generosity and sense of community. She has used her platform to champion causes she believes in, from environmental activism to musicians' rights. Her collaborations span generations, and she has a reputation for lifting up younger artists, much like Richards himself has done throughout his career. When Richards talks about Bonnie, there's always a tone of mutual respect. She's not just another talented musician in his eyes. She's a peer who has mastered the balance between skill and soul, whether trading guitar licks backstage, sharing a laugh over old road stories, or performing side by side. Keith sees in Bonnie a reflection of his own musical values, authenticity, passion, and a refusal to compromise. Ultimately, Keith Richards loves Bonnie Raitt because she embodies what he believes music should be: deeply felt, technically superb, and unapologetically true to oneself. She's proof that you can be both a virtuoso and a storyteller, both a legend and a lifelong student of the craft. In her, Keith finds not just a fellow artist, but a kindred soul in the endless pursuit of musical truth. Keith Richards' lasting legacy, following his deep admiration for fellow musicians like Bonnie Raitt. Keith Richards' own personal legacy is equally remarkable. Beyond his iconic riffs with the Rolling Stones, Richards has become a living embodiment of rock and roll's rebellious spirit, fueled by authenticity, resilience, and an unwavering love for music. His influence stretches across generations, inspiring countless guitarists and songwriters to embrace imperfection as part of their artistic truth. More than fame or fortune, Richards's greatest legacy is the reminder that music, at its core, is about honesty, connection, and the fearless pursuit of one's own voice. Life lessons via Keith Richards. Building on his enduring personal legacy, Keith Richards' life offers a powerful lesson in staying true to oneself. Through decades of highs, lows, and reinvention, Richards has shown that authenticity is the most valuable currency in both music and life. His refusal to conform, his resilience in the face of challenges, and his dedication to his craft prove that success is not just about talent, it's about passion, persistence, and living unapologetically. Ultimately, Richards teaches us that the truest art comes from embracing who you are, flaws and all. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment your thoughts, and subscribe for more amazing stories.